Welcome to the deep dive. If you're an entrepreneur or, just someone who's had that amazing idea pop into your head for a new product, you know the feeling. It's that mix of excitement, the potential, but then there's that doubt creeping in. Is this idea actually any good? Like, is it really worth putting everything on the line for? I think the biggest fear isn't really the hard work involved. It's the nightmare scenario, right? Investing all that time, all that money into something the market just doesn't want.
Oh, absolutely. That fear. It's completely rational. I mean, look at the stats.
Yeah.
Most startups don't fail because they can't build the thing. They fail because they build the wrong thing or for the wrong people. So our mission today is really about tackling that fear head on. We want to move past just hoping for the best. We're going deep into a proven, systematic way to validate your startup idea before you go all in, before the big commitments.
Exactly. We've pulled together what's essentially a blueprint, taking those initial sparks of genius and turning them into products that are ready for the market, that are resilient. Our goal here is to give you strategies, actual techniques based on data so you can figure out if your idea has legs. We want you to be confident, not just crossing your fingers.
And this is going to be pretty thorough. We're covering the whole journey, starting with, focused market research, then rigorously testing those core assumptions you're making. We'll get into building that first real version, the minimum viable product, the MVP, and then critically, how to transition into actually executing and growing, fueled by constant feedback from your customers. Basically, we're laying out the playbook that successful entrepreneurs use, the ones who learned, often the hard way, how to cut down the risk and really maximize what they learn.
Okay, let's dive in. We have to start where every great business has to start, with the customer. So get ready. We're aiming to turn that initial idea into something the market actually validates. Segment 1, discovering your market. Let's really unpack this foundational piece.
Right. This first step, it's all about getting clarity. You absolutely need a crystal clear picture of who your potential market is. Because honestly, every single decision you make later on, product design, how you market it, how much you spend, it all hinges on knowing who you're targeting and, crucially, what they really need, not just what you think they need.
And the main tool for getting that clarity is the buyer persona. Now, I know some people think of personas as just like a fluffy marketing exercise, a made-up customer profile, but used right, especially in this early validation stage, it's a massive risk reduction tool. If you skip creating these detailed personas, you're basically designing in a vacuum for nobody in particular.
Yeah, you've got to go deeper than the basics. Demographics, age, income, job title, location. Okay, that's surface level stuff. Useful for maybe targeting ads later, sure. But it doesn't tell you why someone would buy. You need to get into the psychographics. What do they actually value? What are their interests? What's their lifestyle like? And most importantly, what are the specific pain points they have that your product might solve? So instead of just small business owners, 30, 45, think more like, okay, there's Sarah. She's a freelance designer, super busy, values simplicity and things just working. Her biggest headache, losing billable hours wrestling with clunky invoicing software. See the difference?
That level of detail is exactly it, because that informs the solution you actually build. And to paint these really vivid pictures, you need to pull information from lots of places. We're talking about actually talking to people one-on-one interviews, doing broader surveys, looking at what people are saying on social media, digging into any customer data you might already have, and reading industry reports too. If you think you're solving Sarah's problem, you need to actually hear Sarah's voice or people like her in your research.
Okay, so once you've got those personas sketched out, the next really critical step is confirming that the needs and desires you think they have are real. This is honestly the core difference often between a startup that takes off and one that just fizzles out. Are you solving a real, painful problem? Or just something that's kind of a nice to have? Your idea has to offer a genuine, ideally measurable improvement to their life or work.
And finding that out requires getting into the qualitative stuff, the deep insights. We need to get past just surface complaints. So we start asking those key questions. What are they really trying to achieve? What are their goals? And when it comes to current solutions out there, how happy are they? Or maybe, how unhappy are they? What specific things do they wish were better, even if it seems small?
And to get those kinds of nuanced answers, you use methods like observational research. Seriously, if you're building, say, scheduling software, go watch people try to schedule meetings using whatever they use now. You'll see the frustration firsthand. Focus groups can work too, but the source material rightly points out the danger of groupthink, where everyone kind of agrees, or one loud person dominates. It might not reflect the real market.
That's a really good point. That group dynamic can be misleading. So, to get around that and capture more organic, widespread views, you need to be actively listening where your target audience already hangs out. Think online forums, specific Reddit communities, Facebook groups, places where they're already talking, complaining, sharing tips, and analyzing customer reviews for existing products, especially the negative ones, the one-star reviews. Pure gold. It tells you exactly where the current options are failing. That's where your opportunity might be. This qualitative stuff, it's the foundation.
Absolutely. But depth isn't everything on its own. Those qualitative insights, they need to be balanced with quantitative data. That gives you the breadth, the statistical backup. So this is where things like online surveys sent out widely come in. Early A/B testing, maybe even just on landing page concepts or ad copy. Proper market size analysis, how big is this potential pool? Competitor analysis, of course. And web analytics, if you've got something online already.
Yeah, and the quantitative side is where you spot the real patterns, right? It lets you connect the dots. You might find out that, okay, lots of people mention problem X, but the thing that actually makes them switch providers or stop using a tool is problem Y. And maybe problem Y hits people over 55 much harder. That kind of insight lets you focus your efforts on the biggest, most statistically significant opportunity.
Which leads perfectly into doing a thorough competitive analysis.
Yeah.
And you have to look beyond just the obvious players. We need to identify both direct competitors, the ones offering basically the same kind of solution you are, like two different project management apps, but also, crucially, the indirect competitors. These are the other ways people solve the same core problem, often using simpler or existing tools.
Right. Indirect competitors are often the ones you underestimate. They represent the default behavior. Like if you're building a fancy new note-taking app, your direct competitors are other note apps, but your indirect competitors, pen and paper, emailing yourself, using a basic text file. People stick with what's easy and familiar unless you give them a really compelling reason to switch.
So analyzing them systematically means digging into the details. What features do they offer? What are their pricing strategies? Who exactly are they targeting? And really importantly, look at their marketing. What message are they putting out on their website? What's their tone on social media, their ads? If all your competitors are focused on, say, enterprise clients, maybe there's an opening with small businesses they're ignoring.
And the ultimate goal of all this digging is to find those market gaps. These are your potential footholds. You're looking for things like demographics that aren't being served well, or those pain points that nobody seems to be addressing properly. Maybe there's a chance to integrate with other tools in a way no one else does, or hit a specific price point the market is crying out for. Sometimes exploring a niche market the big players think is too small can be the smartest move.
Finding that niche, yeah. Where the competition isn't fierce, but the need is really high. That can be a shortcut to getting early traction.
Okay, so as you're gathering all this info, qualitative, quantitative, competitor stuff, you have to be super careful about avoiding the common pitfalls. And I think the biggest one, the one that catches out even really smart founders, is confirmation bias. It's human nature, isn't it, to look for and pay attention to the data that confirms what you already believe that your idea is brilliant.
Exactly. You have to actively fight against it. That means deliberately looking for disconfirming evidence. Ask yourself, why won't this work? What data contradicts my hypothesis? Other big warnings. Don't rely too heavily on secondary data reports that might be old or too general. And if you get negative feedback, don't just brush it off because it stings. That's probably the most valuable input you'll get at this stage.
And this seems obvious, but it's critical. Never assume your own experience is universal. Just because you and a few friends have a certain problem doesn't automatically mean there's a big enough market willing to pay for a solution. You need evidence beyond your own circle.
That's so true. And remember, this whole market discovery thing, it's not a one-time task you check off a list. Markets change. Customer needs evolve. New tech emerges. Competitors pop up. It has to be an ongoing process. The moment you stop listening and learning about your market is the moment you start falling behind.
Okay, so once we've done that work, we've got a solid evidence-based understanding of who the customer is and what problem we're genuinely solving for them. That sets us up perfectly for the next stage. Segment 2, rigorously validating assumptions. Let's get into the proof.
Right, so we're shifting gear now from discovery to, well, proof. Every single startup idea, doesn't matter how brilliant it sounds, it's built on a whole stack of assumptions. Beliefs about how customers will behave, what price they'll pay, which features they absolutely need. And until you actually test these beliefs, they're really just guesses. Educated guesses, maybe, but still guesses.
And the reason this validation stage is so incredibly important It's all about managing risk, plain and simple. Those untested assumptions, they're like hidden landmines for a startup. They lead to wasted engineering effort, building features nobody wants, designing the wrong user experience, and yeah, eventually running out of cash and failing. Validation is basically your insurance policy against building something destined to flop.
The upsides are huge, though. You obviously reduce your risk by catching fatal flaws early, before they become fatal. You save precious resources, time, money, effort, by pivoting or adjusting course before you've spent a fortune. You get incredibly deep, actionable insights into what actually motivates your customers. And maybe most importantly, you build real confidence. Confidence for your team, sure, but also the kind of evidence-based confidence that investors absolutely need to see. They want data, not just enthusiasm.
Yeah, you can almost picture it like an assumption validation funnel. At the top, you have all your initial assumptions. As you start testing them, you immediately begin identifying potential issues like, oops, that belief was wrong. Successfully navigating those means you save resources and gain insights. That builds the hard evidence you need to properly address issues and build confidence, which ultimately makes it much easier to attract investors. It's like a chain reaction of proof.
So, okay, how do you actually identify and then prioritize this potentially long list of assumptions? First step is just listing them all out, every single belief your business relies on. Then try to categorize them. Are they market assumptions? Like, is the market actually big enough? Customer assumptions. Will people really pay $50 a month for this? Product assumptions. Is feature X absolutely essential or just nice? Business model assumptions. Can we actually make money and scale this profitably?
And the prioritization part is key, isn't it? You can't test everything at once. You have to focus your energy on the most critical assumptions first. These are the deal breakers, the ones where if they turn out to be wrong, your whole business model basically crumbles. Like if your entire strategy relies on customers valuing convenience above everything else, and your tests show they actually prioritize price way more, you need to know that now, not after you've built the whole thing. You don't spend weeks testing button colors before you've validated that core value proposition.
Exactly. Which brings us to adopting a more, well, scientific approach to testing. Every test you run shouldn't just be a casual poll. It needs to be a properly designed experiment. There are some essential steps. First, you define the hypothesis. Turn that vague assumption into something clear, testable, and measurable. Like not just people will like our premium tier, but at least 40% of users shown the premium option will choose it over the basic tier.
Second, set success criteria. Before you run the test, decide what result counts as success or failure. What specific number or metric proves or disproves your hypothesis. You need that clear line. Third, choose your method A/B test, pilot, smoke test. We'll get into those. Fourth, execute the test carefully, trying to minimize bias. Fifth, analyze the results objectively against those criteria you set. And finally, draw conclusions. Do we persevere, pivot, or maybe we need more data?
It's this structured approach that really separates smart iteration from just, throwing things at the wall and hoping something sticks.
Yeah.
And now we can dig into some of the specific, powerful techniques for doing this testing rigorously.
Okay, this is where it gets practical and really interesting. Let's talk advanced validation techniques. First up, the classic, super powerful one, A/B testing, or sometimes called split testing. This is fantastic for validating specific user preferences or behaviors because the whole point is you change only one thing at a time. Perfect for testing different headlines, button text, images, even pricing points or feature descriptions.
Let's look at that concrete example again, the button color test. So version A had a blue button. It got a 3.2% click-through rate, CTR, and a 1.8% conversion rate. Version B used a green button, got 2.9% CTR and 1.5% conversion.
Now that difference might seem tiny, just 0.3% difference in CTR, 0.3% in conversion, but when you scale that up to thousands or millions of users, that can be a huge difference in revenue or signups. The key here is the statistical analysis gives you confidence. We're not just guessing, oh, blue seems better. We have data showing user behavior favors version A, cold, hard facts driving the decision.
Okay, next technique. Pilot programs. This is where you launch a small-scale but realistic version of your product or service to a limited, carefully chosen group of users who represent your target audience. The big advantage of a pilot is that it lets you test multiple assumptions all at once in a real-world setting. How does it integrate? Is it easy to use? Does it actually deliver the promised value?
Right. This is often perfect for B2B products or anything complex that needs integration or significant user training. Like if you're rolling out a new enterprise software system, you can't just do a landing page test. You need a pilot program within one or two client companies to test everything, the technical integration, the user onboarding process, the support needs, and whether it actually improves their workflow as promised.
And running a successful pilot needs careful planning. You need super clear objectives. What exactly are you trying to learn? You need to select a sample group that truly represents your larger target market. You develop a minimal but functional version, just the core stuff. Then you launch it to that group. And you have to be relentless about gathering data performance metrics, detailed feedback, watching how they use it over a defined period.
And the third big one, often a favorite for its speed and low cost, is the smoke test. This is all about gauging real market interest before you've even built the product, or at least before you finished it. It's the ultimate test of demand with minimal upfront investment.
Yeah, the implementation is usually pretty straightforward, though it needs some creative thinking. You essentially create a compelling preview of the product. Often, it's just a landing page that clearly explains the problem you solve and pitches your solution, even though the solution doesn't fully exist yet. The call to action isn't buy now. It's usually something like sign up for early access, get notified at launch, or sometimes even a pre-order button that leads to a thanks we'll let you know message.
And the critical thing you measure isn't just how many people visit the page, but the engagement. What percentage clicks that call to action button? What percentage actually completes the sign up or pre-order form? If you get a significant number of people willing to give you their email address, or sometimes even tentative payment info for a product that's still just an idea, that's powerful validation that the problem is real and your proposed solution resonates. It's almost immediate proof of demand.
So taking all these results from A/B tests, pilots, smoke tests, and actually using them effectively is the next crucial step. It really requires meticulous documentation. You need detailed records of every experiment, what you tested, why, the results, the insights you gained. And that knowledge can't live in a silo. It has to be shared across the whole team, product engineering, marketing, so everyone's aligned. And the guiding principle has to be rapid iteration based on what you learned.
And this discipline becomes absolutely vital when you start talking to investors, right? You need to demonstrate that you have a validation culture, that your decisions are driven by data and learning, not just gut feelings or chasing the latest trend, that you prioritize measurable progress over just sticking to the original plan no matter what.
Exactly. So once we've proven there's a real market need and we've validated our most critical assumptions with hard evidence, then we're finally ready to move from just concepts and tests to building something tangible. Which brings us neatly into segment 3, building and iterating the minimum viable product, the MVP.
Ah, the MVP, the minimum viable product. It's probably one of the most misunderstood terms in the whole startup world, isn't it? People often think it means just like a quick and dirty version, maybe a bit buggy, just rushed out the door, but the source material is really clear on this. An MVP isn't sloppy. It's actually a highly strategic tool.
Precisely. It's the very first tangible version of your validated idea. And it's specifically designed, engineered almost, to do one main thing. Test your core value proposition with actual, real users while spending the minimum amount of time and resources possible. The whole goal is to maximize validated learning for the least amount of effort.
So its characteristics are really specific and strategic. It has to have this laser focus on just the core functionality. What's the absolute minimum needed to solve that primary problem we identified way back in segment 1? It has to deliver some immediate value, even if it's limited, to those first users, the early adopters. And maybe most importantly, it has to be built in a way that makes it easy to learn from how people use it and iterate quickly.
So the very first step in actually developing the MVP is being really disciplined about defining its scope. You have to go back to those assumptions you validated. What's the single most important problem you proved people have and want solved? That dictates your initial feature set. A good way to think about it is categorizing potential features into maybe 3 buckets.
Yeah, like the must-haves, these are the absolute bare minimum features required for the product to function and solve that core problem. Without these, it just doesn't work. Then the nice-to-haves, these would add value, sure, make it better, but they aren't strictly essential for the initial test. And finally, the can-waits. These are features for future versions, maybe based on later feedback. For that very first MVP launch, you have to be ruthless and focus only on the must-haves. That discipline is what stops scope creep and lets you get something out there fast to start learning.
And choosing the right type of MVP is also strategic because different types are better for testing different things. We should probably give the listener some options here. For instance, there's the concierge MVP. This is where you actually deliver the service manually behind the scenes to a small group of initial customers.
Right. The classic story people tell is often Zappos. Nick Swinmurn, the founder, didn't build a huge warehouse and complex e-commerce site first. He supposedly went to local shoe stores, took photos of shoes, put them on a basic website. If someone ordered, he'd physically go buy the shoe and ship it himself. No inventory risk, minimal tech build. He was manually testing the core assumption. Will people actually buy shoes online sight unseen?
Then there's the Wizard of Oz MVP. This one's clever. You present what looks like a fully working, maybe even automated product to the user. But behind the curtain, it's actually the founders manually doing all the work. The user thinks they're interacting with some smart algorithm, but really, it's just you pulling the levers. It's brilliant for testing user interface flows, demand for a complex service, without having to build the complex back-end technology yet.
Other types we've touched on include the landing page MVP, really just testing interest, like a smoke test. Or the single feature MVP, where you focus all your effort on making one core feature incredibly good at solving that main problem better than anyone else. Or even a piecemeal MVP, where you kind of stitch together existing tools, maybe Zapier, Airtable, some off-the-shelf components to deliver the core service without much custom coding. Minimizes development time.
Yeah, and regardless of which MVP model you choose, the way you build it should almost always be agile. The Agile methodology is perfect for this because it's all about flexibility, iterating in short cycles, and constantly incorporating feedback. Key practices here include things like iterative development building and releasing small pieces frequently, continuous integration, maybe daily stand-up meetings for the team, writing user stories instead of massive stacked documents, regular reviews.
Finding the right balance with simplicity here is tough, though, isn't it? The MVP needs to be simple enough to build and launch quickly and affordably, but it also needs to be sophisticated enough to actually work and effectively test that core value you're offering. You're aiming for function over polish initially. Sophistication in an MVP comes from how well it solves that key problem, not from having tons of features or slick animations. You have to be okay with some parts being imperfect as long as the core works.
Absolutely. And once that MVP is out there, even with just a few users, its main job begins. Gathering and interpreting user feedback. This becomes your primary source of truth now. We use all sorts of methods, maybe short in-app surveys asking about specific features, detailed one-on-one interviews with those early users. Walk me through how you used it. Looking at usage analytics, what buttons are they actually clicking? What paths do they take? A/B testing different flows within the MVP, even monitoring social media for mentions.
But interpreting that feedback needs real care. You always need to look for patterns and trends across multiple users, not just react to one person's comment, and try to quantify it where possible.
Yeah.
And this is where that warning about the loud minority comes in again. You might have a small group of very vocal early adopters who are demanding, say, feature X. They email you every day about it.
Right. And if you blindly build feature X just because they're loud, you might be wasting valuable development time on something the silent majority of your users doesn't actually care about. Or worse, it makes the product more complex for everyone else. You always have to cross-reference that passionate, qualitative feedback, we need feature X, with quantitative data. Okay, but analytics show only 2% of users ever even go near that part of the app. Maybe feature X isn't the priority right now.
And this all feeds into that crucial iterative cycle. You learn from the feedback and the data, then you build refinements or new must-have features into the MVP based on those validated insights. You measure the impact of those changes with new feedback and data, and then you refine the MVP again. It's this continuous loop. Build, measure, learn. Build, measure, learn. It's a learning machine.
And running through that cycle enough times eventually gets you to a really critical decision point. Is it time to move from just iterating the MVP to building out the full product? You have to look at the data and decide whether to persevere with the current direction or make a significant pivot. The signs to persevere are usually pretty encouraging. Things like users. Users are actually engaging with the core features the way you hoped they would. Key metrics, maybe daily active users, retention rates, task completion rates, are trending positive. And the feedback you're getting suggests you need incremental improvements, refinements, not a fundamental rethink.
Conversely, the signs that maybe you need to pivot, which means making a significant change in direction, maybe targeting in a different market, changing the core feature set, or altering the business model, those signs are often painful but clear. Things like really low user engagement or activation rates, high churn people try it once and never come back. Feedback consistently indicating that the problem you thought you were solving isn't actually that important or urgent for them. Or maybe discovering that the way the MVP works just isn't scalable or financially viable as a business. And it's important to remember a pivot isn't failure. It's a strategic change based on learning.
Absolutely. And if the signs point to persevere, making that transition from MVP to scaling up requires immediate focused action. You need to solidify your product roadmap based on everything you learned from the MVP. You have to start seriously thinking about scaling the technology infrastructure. Can it handle way more users? Often means moving to scalable cloud solutions, focusing on performance optimization. You probably need to expand the team, and you need to implement proper, scalable marketing and customer support systems.
Which perfectly sets up our final section. We've gone from idea through market discovery, assumption testing, MVP iteration. Now it's time for sustained execution and growth. Segment 4. The engine customer feedback loop and execution. This is where the validated idea meets the complexity of scaling and long-term survival.
Yeah, this continuous customer feedback loop, we mentioned it with the MVP, but at scale, it's not just helpful, it becomes the absolute lifeblood of the company. It's what keeps you growing and relevant in a market that's always changing. Your ability to systematically listen to customers, make sense of what they're saying, and then act on it. That often becomes the key differentiator between companies that lead their market and those that just fade away.
The benefits of getting this loop right are huge, and they really ripple through the whole business, don't they? You get continuous improvement in your product market fit, making sure your product stays aligned with what customers actually need. You see much enhanced customer loyalty because people feel heard. When you fix something they complained about or build a feature they asked for, they feel valued. It directly reduces churn. It can even drive cost efficiency because you stop wasting development effort on things customers don't care about. And maybe most excitingly, it constantly uncovers innovation opportunities, new problems to solve, new features, sometimes whole new product lines based on unmet needs customers reveal.
So how do you establish this system effectively, especially as you grow? It starts again with having clear objectives. What specific things are you trying to learn from feedback right now? That clarity helps you choose the right methods. Then it's about choosing the right channels. Maybe you still do some deep dive one-on-one interviews for understanding complex issues, but you'll rely more on broader surveys for statistical data. In-app feedback tools become crucial. Support tickets are a goldmine. And timing those feedback requests is key. Using things like microsurveys, short focused questions that pop up right after a user completes a specific action can give you really valuable contextual feedback in the moment.
And as you scale, you need to get smarter about how you collect that feedback, especially with surveys. We should probably touch on some advanced survey techniques. Instead of just simple yes-no questions, using things like Likert scale questions, rate your satisfaction from 1 to 5 gives you quantifiable data on attitudes and opinions, much richer than just a yes. Implementing skip logic in your surveys is also great. That means the survey adapts based on previous answers, so users only see relevant questions. It makes the survey shorter for them, less annoying, and gives you more targeted data.
Yeah, mobile optimization is obviously essential too, and you still have to constantly fight that confirmation bias, even with large data sets, maybe even more so, because it's easy to find some data point that supports your belief. So mitigation strategies become even more important, actively tasking people with looking for disconfirming evidence in reports, making sure you have diverse perspectives in the room when you analyze feedback people who aren't afraid to challenge assumptions.
That idea of blind analysis is interesting too, where the analyst looks at the data, say, from an A-B test without knowing which group saw version A and which saw version B. It forces them to interpret the numbers objectively without subconsciously favoring the version they hoped would win. And always asking, okay, what else could explain these results? Challenging the first conclusion you jump to.
And remember, just gathering all this feedback is pointless if you don't do anything with it. You absolutely have to close the loop. That means first, prioritizing the feedback. You can't act on everything at once. What's most important, most urgent, impacts the most users. Create a clear action plan based on that prioritization. Test any significant changes internally or with a beta group before rolling them out widely, just to make sure you don't break something else.
Yeah.
Monitor the impact of the changes on your key metrics. And critically, communicate back to your customers. Let them know you heard their feedback and what you did about it. Even if you decide not to act on something, explaining why can build goodwill.
Okay, so the feedback loop is humming. But as the business scales, the whole execution strategy has to mature, especially on the technical and market monitoring side. You need continuous market monitoring, right? Keeping a constant eye on industry trends, what competitors are doing, overall customer sentiment. That awareness is what allows you to stay agile.
Exactly. And the product and the underlying infrastructure have to evolve constantly. Scaling the technology becomes a major focus. You're probably looking at full cloud scalability to handle load. Continuous performance optimization speed matters. Security becomes paramount, automating processes wherever possible. And the product strategy itself evolves. It becomes less about finding the core value and more about prioritizing which high-value features to add next. Relentlessly refining the UI/UX, the user interface, and user experience for ease of use at scale, looking for opportunities for personalization.
And when you've got potentially hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of users, you just can't manually read every support ticket or survey response anymore. So you need advanced feedback analysis techniques just to cope with the volume. This is where things like natural language processing, NLP, come in. Using AI to automatically scan and analyze huge volumes of text feedback from support chats, reviews, surveys to identify common themes, categorize sentiment, positive, negative, neutral, and spot emerging problems without humans having to read everything.
Yeah, and you start using predictive analytics, analyzing user behavior data to identify patterns that might predict future actions, like which customers are at high risk of churning, so you can intervene proactively. This requires pulling together data from lots of different places, usage logs, CRM data, survey results, support interactions into one integrated data source or data warehouse, giving you that complete picture. Real-time feedback systems also become more important.
Wow, okay. So the tech and feedback systems get way more complex, but ultimately sustained success also comes down to financial management and keeping a close eye on the key metrics that really show the health of the business during this execution phase. We should probably slow down and define a few of the most critical ones for listeners.
Definitely. First, you absolutely have to track your customer acquisition cost, SARD. Basically, how much does it cost you in marketing and sales spend to get one new paying customer? And you have to compare that constantly to the lifetime value, LTV, of that customer. That's the total amount of revenue you realistically expect to generate from that customer over the entire time they remain a customer. The golden rule is your LTV must be significantly higher than your CAC. Usually people look for LTV to be at least 3 times CAC. If it costs you more to acquire a customer than you ever make from them, your business model is broken.
Right. Then there's the burn rate, simply how quickly your company is spending cash, usually measured per month. And closely related is your runway based on your current cash balance and burn rate. How many months can the company operate before it runs out of money? Investors watch runway like a hawk. But maybe the most fundamental financial health check is unit economics. This means looking at the revenue and costs associated with just one single unit of your business. That unit could be one customer, one subscription sold, one item shipped, whatever makes sense for your model.
Exactly. Positive unit economics mean that on a per unit basis, you're profitable. Every time you sell one unit, you make money. That gives you the confidence that scaling up selling more units will lead to overall profitability. If your unit economics are negative, meaning you lose money on every single customer or transaction, then scaling will just make you lose money faster. You have to fix the unit economics first.
So managing all this, the tech scaling, the feedback loops, the financials in an environment that's constantly changing, it really comes down to embracing agility, doesn't it? That ability to adapt is maybe the most valuable asset a startup has. Cultivating that agile mindset means being okay with uncertainty, actively encouraging experimentation, learning quickly from things that don't work out, and staying incredibly close to your customers. Often, that requires real cross-functional collaboration, making sure engineering, marketing, sales, support are all talking and sharing insights constantly.
That really brings us full circle, doesn't it? We've traced the path from that initial spark of an idea through discovering the market, rigorously validating assumptions, building and iterating the MVP, and finally managing the complexities of execution and scaling. What we've seen is that it's this combination, thorough validation, upfront, strategic execution driven by data, and just sheer persistence. Those are the tools you need to turn a vision into a sustainable reality.
Absolutely. And just think about any really successful company you admire. They almost certainly didn't start out with perfect certainty. They started with hypotheses, they tested them rigorously, they learned, they adapted, they had systems in place like the ones we've discussed that allowed them to pivot or adjust when the market data told them to. So your success, your startup success, it hinges less on the brilliance of that initial idea and much more on your ability to continuously test, learn, refine, and evolve that idea based on what the market actually tells you through cold, hard feedback.
The framework exists. The techniques are out there. Now it's about putting in the work.
So as you think about your own venture, maybe that idea you've been kicking around, we want to leave you with one final thought, a challenge almost. What is the single most critical, unproven assumption that your idea rests on right now? The one belief that if it turned out to be wrong, the whole thing would probably fall apart. And then ask yourself, what's the absolute simplest, fastest, cheapest smoke test or experiment you could possibly run, maybe even next week, to try and disprove that assumption? Because that's where true validation begins, with the humility to challenge your own beliefs.
Enjoyed this episode? Subscribe to Digital Vault X for more knowledge transformed into podcasts. Don't miss the next one.